My name is Gasia, Mikaelian, and I'm coming to you through KTVU Fox 2 News in the San Francisco Bay Area. You can probably tell I'm working from home, so is our guest. I welcome Dr. Tasha Eurich. You're an organizational psychologist and author. You're clearly working from home as well, and that is what we're talking about.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I've been working from home for 7 months now, as have millions of Americans for the first time. I've learned that there are many things I like about it. I am definitely missing my best friend at work because he and I used to chat about everything and anything, and I don't have that now. Are you hearing that from a lot of people you're talking with?
I am. One of the most surprising findings in organizational science, in my opinion, is the power of a best friend at work. Other researchers have found that about 80% of people have good friends at work, but only about 25% of us have a best friend at work. And as it turns out, that predicts a lot of things. It helps us be more successful at work, happier, less stressed, even more engaged in our jobs. And so for those of us that have lost touch with our best friends at work or our work spouses, there are a couple of things you can do to strengthen that bond during this unprecedented time.
All right, let's talk about it. And I'll mention that, one sad and sorry substitute that my friend and I have come up with is, we top line message each other. Every now and then we'll text, but really it's been sort of work-based communication. Not the same as, running off to the break room and talking about what so-and-so said in the meeting. So, take it from there as far as what we can do.
That you brought up a really important point about bonding with people at work. Researchers have found actually that if we're not talking about non-work things, we're less likely to develop friendships. And so I think it's so transactional now. We're all working from home. We've got, our kids and our pets in our faces, and we just want to get the work done. But even building in small 5 or 10-minute opportunities to maybe go outside and take a walk and talk to your best friend at work, that can make a big difference just to get away from that day-to-day grind.
What about someone, we've actually added members to our news team, and one is in charge of, of our web department, which is a huge aspect in what any news organization does. So he and I have been messaging back and forth, and I had an idea that I wanted to pitch. So it was sort of a special communication, not just, fulfilling the transaction. And I said, can I call you, talk on the phone? And he said, sure, if that's what you prefer. And it felt weird to me to ask to talk on the phone, but once we hooked up by phone, we spent 45 minutes talking about, hey, where do you live? Where are you from? Tell me about your family and your pets. And then at the tail end, I said, oh, by the way, here's that idea I wanted to pitch. So in the end, it ended up being a really nice way to bond with him because I never met him even when we were all in the newsroom. He was hired during the pandemic.
Right. A lot of my clients are going through that. I work with senior executives who have made hires, key hires in their team, and they want to make sure that that person is brought into the fold in at least a similar way as they would have otherwise. And I think you brought up something that's really important. Pick up the phone. It doesn't have to be an hour or 2-hour conversation, even just to check in and say, hey, I wish I could be taking you out to a cup of coffee, but can I ask how things are going? How can I help? It really goes a longer way than we would think.
Now, what if someone is in the position, they're listening to you and they're saying, I never really had that connection at work. I never really had a bestie. To some people, they show up, they do their work and they go home. But now, since we're in these 4 walls all day, that what didn't seem like such a big deal to be missing before is now a huge thing because they truly are all alone.
There never has been a more important time to have friends at work. One of the things that we know, for example, is talking to people who know what we're going through, i.e. our work stress, really significantly reduce the amount of stress we're experiencing. They actually reduce the hormone cortisol, which is what flares up when we're stressed. And so you sort of think about it, we might not feel like we have time, we might not feel like we have the energy, but investing in those work friendships has a pretty real payoff.
Do you have any advice for anyone out there who's listening and might be a manager or in a supervisor position? I don't think my news director would ever encourage me to horse around or goof off and, chatter away in the newsroom kitchen. But should it be a manager's job now to sort of encourage that bonding and friendship aspect of work, even when he or she didn't do so when we were all in the office?
In short, absolutely. Again, there's never been a more important time for us to connect. We're already in each other's homes. And so it's actually not that big of a leap to start to do a little bit more maybe personal interaction. So if a manager, for example, doesn't want to take time away from work, one thing to think about would even be, can you build in 10 minutes at the beginning of a meeting to ask how people are doing? Even something as simple as that. Or if you want to do a book club, maybe there's a book that all of you feel like it will help you, come together as a team, do your job better, spend 15 or 20 minutes talking about that together. I think for managers, it's not about building in these huge, productivity sucking opportunities. It's more about saying, how can we be strategic and come together so that the work can get done better and faster?
I know when organizations are successful, be that making money or, dispelling information, whatever their task is, when they're successful in that, it's a lot easier for employees to be happy and get along well. Unfortunately, I think every work setting is under stress, either because of layoffs or impending layoffs or the inability to do your job the way you used to do it. It can be very hard to be friendly when you're very much stressed out about your core task.
And that's exactly right. And, most of my clients, my CEOs, they're in survival mode. And the take home, I think, for anybody who has a job and who wants to build stronger social connections is to take that into your own hands. It doesn't have to take a ton of time. You don't have to go completely out of your way, but you're doing this for you. And, in a world where we can't control very much that's happening to us, that is something we can control, and it will give us a tangible improvement in our day-to-day life.
Some people I know say, their company is in the middle of possible layoffs or salary reductions, and they say, I don't want to really give my heart to my coworker or open up to my boss because I'm sort of on guard. Am I going to be downsized? Are they going to cut my salary? And when you're in that defensive position, it doesn't feel right, because you think, what if I give you something and then 2 weeks later you come back and say, oh, you're on the list of not necessary?
There is definitely a risk. There's also a reward. And so what I would encourage people to think about is, what do you feel comfortable with? You might be one of the people who isn't feeling particularly lonely. And if that's the case and you're not as comfortable, maybe take the time with your family or your friends. But for anybody who is just feeling exhausted or burnt out, having that connection, even if it's not telling them all of your deepest, darkest secrets, even if it's just, wow, this project is really challenging. How do you feel about it? That, again, can be a really important factor.
How do you think organizations are going to come out of this? I keep telling myself, one day I will go back to the newsroom. One day I will be able to take a walk and get coffee with my work bestie. These are very, very difficult times for many reasons. How do you think an organization can come out of this pandemic in the best possible way?
So my smartest clients are using this time to invest in the strength of their working relationships. And the idea, just like you said, is we won't be like this forever. And the teams and organizations where the culture has deteriorated or people have grown apart, they are not going to be able to come back to the office and pick up where they left off. But for those that are making that investment and trying to build those bonds, they will absolutely be more successful when they get back to the office for all of the reasons we talked about.
I find myself looking forward to things that I totally took for granted in the past. I think about, what I do in the newsroom is a small part of, there's people filling our building typically, but just being able to share an elevator ride with someone in a totally different department, right? Or to be able to walk up to the front desk and notice that, the lady there has an amazing new hairstyle. These are all things that I don't consider core to my mission as a journalist, but really did help kind of round out my whole experience in my newsroom and at my station.
It's interesting because it's not necessarily core to our identity as professionals, but they're core to us as humans. You think about tens of thousands of years ago when we were living together in tribes to survive. That meant something. And if we were ostracized or if we were alone, that meant certain death in many cases. And so this idea that we have an urge to be together, to connect with other people, I think that is something we should celebrate. And it's something, for me personally, I'm hoping to never take for granted again when this is all over.
And to the person who says, look, this may all be great for you chatty Cathys out there, right? I keep my emotions locked up in my heart. I don't want to give anything away. What do you say to that person who is now more resistant than ever to opening up?
I would say that, even if you're a hard-nosed business person, if you look at the most successful CEOs of the 21st century, every single one of them found a way to connect with people on a personal level. And so even if you don't do it for your own gratification, maybe do it for your career. Maybe think about how you can be a more effective, respected leader, because there's really, as long as you're careful and strategic about it, there's not really much of a downside here. There's only upside.
And finally, Dr. Eurich, for people who are listening to you and want to learn more about what you do or the ideas you presented, are there any online resources or sites that you'd like to direct viewers to?
Sure. One of my primary research interests is in self-awareness at work. And so if anybody wants to take a quiz on how self-aware they are as rated by them and someone who knows them well, you can go to www.insight-quiz.com.
All right. I actually wrote down the address because
Awesome.
of course we all think we're great, but it's so interesting to have someone else rate you. So very good. Dr. Tasha Eurich, organizational psychologist and author. I appreciate the time. You know, like I said, I've been working from home for 7 months now, and it happened very, very quickly with very little notice. And I think, you know, yes, I wish I grabbed that extra lip liner or, you know, that one dress that would be so comfy to work from home. But more than any of the stuff, I miss the people in my newsroom. And I think, you know, one day we'll be together again. We might not hug, but we'll be together. And that's a really good thing to think about.
Well said. Thank you for having me.
Of course, it's been my pleasure. Dr. Eurich, thank you again.